Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
SAS Great Escapes. In the spirit of his previous volumes, Damien Lewis reveals the untold stories of the war's most daring and audacious escapes as executed by the world's most famous fighting force, the SAS. Delighted to say that, so welcome back. I guess we can call him now friend of the show, Damien Lewis. Damien, good morning to you, sir.
Morning, Giles. How's it going?
It's going very, very well again. And for those who don't know, Damien, of course, has got the job and indeed the working space that I covet. Because are you in the pulpit today, or are you in the cloisters?
Yeah, I'm in the altar. So I live in what was once a chapel. So I write from the altar, get my divine inspiration here. It's absolutely fantastic. Weather's a bit cold today here in Dorset, but well, I guess it's nice and sunny where you are.
Yeah, it's good. It's not too bad, thank you. But it means you have to keep tapping the keypads to keep yourself warm. That's always a good excuse, Concentrates the mind. I mean.
Yeah, 100%. Look at me. Here I am.
Yeah,
dressed in 3 layers, trying to keep warm and healthy, and at the desk.
With a warm and what's it beverage? Now the thing is, people say, why, Giles? Why are you so interested in the Second World War? It's been done to death. There's so much. We know everything about it there is to know. Oh no, we bleeding don't. Because you are living proof of that. Because every time I think you've outdone yourself with a previous book that you've written, you come up with something even more incredulous. So how are you finding this stuff?
Well, there's one story in Great Escapes 5, which is, I've always wanted to tell it. It's the story of John Jack Sillitoe, who executed this solo escape across the North African desert.
Right.
When he was soldiering there with Blair Paddy Mayne's SAS. And I always presumed there was just never enough material to tell it properly. I mean, I knew the story. It's an amazing story. One of the most epic escape stories of World War II, without a shadow of a doubt. And then his family reached out to me about a year and a half ago and said, look, have you ever thought about covering, our father's story in a Great Escapes volume? And I said, I'd love to, but how can one tell it? And they said, well, he never spoke about the war, never spoke about what he got up to in the SAS, but he used to go and lecture the SAS regularly, new recruits on escape and evasion and survival. Obviously, he was brilliantly qualified to do so with this legendary story. And we've got all of his lecture notes. And they provided those to me, along with some of the other family archive. And those were just absolutely brilliant first-hand material from which to write the story. So that's just one of 5 in SAS Great Escapes 5. And they all basically rely on that kind of unique family material.
And as a researcher, as an author, is that sort of like getting the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the golden ticket, because you go, good grief, he never spoke about these bits because very few of these men did, and yet there you have it, and you just go, oh, for goodness sake, this absolutely is a brilliant springboard to telling these incredible stories.
Yeah, that was a real eureka moment. I mean, I'd come across Sillitoe's story originally in Malcolm Plaidell, who was the SAS doctor at the time, their first medic, in his biography that he wrote of his war years, which is a brilliant book. And Plaidell was the first person to treat Sillitoe, of course, after his 8-day epic 180-mile escape and evasion across the desert on his own. No water, no food. I mean, just the stuff of legends. So I knew the story, and I knew it was there is almost no other. Well, there is no other solo desert escape story like it, and I just presume we can't tell this one. And then out of the blue, message dropped into my inbox on my Facebook page and says, "Here we might have the way." Yeah, a really, really special moment, and huge thanks to the Sillitoe family who will be at the book launch, which is happening in London in a week's time. So they're coming along with lots of other family members. So yeah, real honour to tell that story.
So I mean, the thing is here. I mean, let's look at this one then, because this is North Africa. So this is what 42, 43. I mean, and explain a little bit about, because obviously is this long range desert group? Is it SAS? Presumably this is deep desert, because that's what it's the Great Sea Sand, isn't it? The Great Sand Sea. Excuse me. So you're deep south.
100%. So Blair Paddy Mayne, who was the commander of the SAS. Or this SAS squadron at the time. Of course, he went on to command the 1st SAS regiment for most of the war. he set up a base in what was known as the Great Sand Sea, which was this area of sand dunes, massive sand dunes, about the size of Ireland, sitting in the Sahara Desert. And they set up a base there because the enemy believed the Great Sand Sea was unnavigable, uninhabitable, that no one could operate from there. So it was a perfect, safe location. And the SAS had learned, through trial and error, how to navigate the sand dunes with their jeeps and how to survive there and thrive there. And Sillitoe set off in a patrol of 2 jeeps to raid the coastal railway line. So 4 men, 2 jeeps. They drove all the way there, 180, 200 miles, did a nighttime reconnaissance of the railway line on foot, got seen by the enemy and attacked. And in the confusion of getting away from that attack, Sillitoe got isolated from the other 3. They made it back to the jeeps first, presume he'd been killed or captured. And so they set off in the jeeps back south towards their base in the Great Sand Sea, leaving Sillitoe behind. And at that moment, when Sillitoe actually made it back to where the jeep should have been parked and found out that everyone had left him, he had a Tommy gun, a greatcoat, and just about nothing else, no water, no food. And he either faced a 180-mile trek through the desert south, on his own, having to navigate all the way there, and heading, he imagined, to the nearest point where he felt, there might be some modicum of safety, which was a dump of food, water and fuel, which the SAS has set up just to the north of the Great Sand Sea. So he thought he could either make his way there, and obviously the chances of succeeding were almost zero, or he could walk a few kilometres north to the local enemy positions and give himself up. So, of course, he chose the former option to head south and set off on that incredible journey. And it becomes as much a tale of psychological endurance as it does physical, because you can imagine, the physical challenges of completing that kind of journey on foot on your own with no water. It just beggars belief. But actually, he starts to really find the psychological toll almost unendurable. There are times when he's close to kind of cracking up and losing it, and it's his psychological strength which is the thing that really gets him through. There's one moment where he comes across a burnt out vehicle, a tank. The train is scattered with the debris of war and earlier fighting, and he finds in it a charred can of bully beef, corned beef. And so he opens it and goes to eat it, and he's so parched from thirst that his mouth kind of gums up and he gags and vomits it all back up again. But then he realises he's got an empty tin. So what can he do? Well, for the rest of the journey, he uses the empty tin to urinate in and then drinks his own urine in an effort to rehydrate himself. And in fact, it does, in the short term, it does rehydrate you. That's one of the ways he actually managed to survive this incredibly, debilitating and impossible journey. So, yeah, lots of beats like that along the way of his journey, which just beg a belief.
It's a big enough thing. And if you've not been in the Sahara, as I have, some bits are, it's not all sort of sand dunes. I mean, there are some sort of scrub and the whole bit, but it's a hostile environment, and I was doing that with literally a luxury camp behind me. Literally, you went behind the dune though, and you're on your own, and you're like, the only thing you can hear is the blood pumping in your ears, the occasional crow that sounds very ominous indeed as it lands near you. And he's done this with, he's presumably navigating by the stars. He's not prepped. It'd be difficult enough to do it if you're prepped for it with water and food, and you'd have hydration tablets now, and that'd be and a compass, and that would be a hard enough task. But presumably he's navigating by stars. He's doing he's drawing on whatever he's got on which was only supposed to be a quick wrecking mission.
Yeah, 100%. He's obviously been through SS selection and highly trained, but even so, he's navigating by sun and stars, which in itself is an incredible feat. I've crossed the Sahara twice, once from north to south, once from south to north.
Right.
But I did it in a Land Rover, in the company of 3 other individuals on an expedition with a vehicle packed with food and spares and water and fuel. And even that was tough enough. And there was one moment where we lost our way and fortunately realised and corrected our path. But shortly after that, we came across an even more brilliantly outfitted vehicle driven by some English guys, and they had been lost for days on end and driving around in circles and realizing they were doing so because they kept seeing the same landmarks and had basically given themselves up for dead. And we came across them and basically set them on their path. So that's how tough it is when you're fully equipped. So to do it on your own in the conditions that Sillito did, that's why it is one of the most legendary escape and evasion stories of the Second World War, and it should be far better known. And hopefully, thanks to the book, it will be.
I mean, are the majority of them sort of desert-based, or are they sort of Northern European jobs? Are they... Because didn't you write one a while back about this incredible thing about landing an aircraft on a German airfield, rescuing people and throwing them on, which is just, if Hollywood had written that script, you would have gone, yeah, that is never going to happen. So, I mean, are there Northern European exploits in there as well?
Yeah, so there's one of the most incredible stories is about a guy called Horace Stokes, sergeant, who parachutes into Italy on Operation Speedwell, which was a mission to blow up German trains deep behind enemy lines in Italy very early on in the war in Italy. They successfully blow up an armoured train, but Stokes has been injured during the parachute drop, and he finds himself unable to complete the original escape and evasion. By the way, they were dropped 800 kilometres north of Rome, so over 1,000 kilometres behind Allied lines,
right,
with no plan whatsoever in terms of how to get them out again. Just you got to find your own way back again. But Stokes is too injured to do so. He believes he's ruptured his groin. He landed on a rooftop during the original airdrop. And so the other two have to continue without him, and they leave him at a local Italian farmstead. And Stokes realises he's dying, so he thinks the only thing he can do, he knows that Rome is about 200 kilometres south of where he is. So he decides to steal a bicycle, cycle to Rome, find his way to the Vatican, because he's heard on the grapevine that the Vatican are running an escape line for Allied prisoners of war. So with what turns out to be sepsis, which obviously kills you, it's very, very severe, he somehow completes an over 200 kilometre cycle south to Rome, gets to Rome, somehow finds his way into the Vatican. The Vatican aren't quite convinced he's who he says he is, but they can tell he's on death's door.
Yeah.
And there happens to be a local Eastern European partisan who was a doctor and a surgeon prior to the war, who's part of the Vatican kind of escape line network, who agrees to operate on Stokes, saves his life by believe it or not, removing one of his testicles, because that's where the sepsis has become most severe. After which,
I'm wincing already, Damien, on this one. I'm already wincing at this, but keep going.
After which, Stokes is recuperating in Rome and decides that he's going to train the Italian partisans, the Italian resistance. Starts training the Italian resistance. That decides that's not good enough. Stops fighting alongside them and carrying out sabotage operations, and eventually gets captured by the enemy, is interrogated by the Gestapo, and he knows that if he reveals who he really is, i.e. a member of the SAS who've been fighting with the Italian resistance, he's going to be executed under the commando order, Hitler's commando order, no doubt whatsoever. So he sticks to his story through days and days of interrogation, that he's simply a regular soldier who was a POW in Italy who escaped, and eventually he's sent to a German prisoner of war camp, and that's where the real story of his escape and evasion begins.
So that's just the warm up. That's just
the warm up.
The fact that he cycled 200 miles with a busted gentleman's area with sepsis, gets it to the Vatican, gets through Rome. I mean, he couldn't have looked like your average Italian, sure, at this point, and then decides to go back out there and fight for the partisans, which is highly dangerous. And that's just the warm up, Damien.
Just the warm-up, yeah. So his incarceration in Germany, it kind of ends with an escape wherein he gets out of the camp, crosses the majority of German territories, heading back to Italy, by the way, hoping to get to Allied lines, because by now they've advanced through Italy and are kind of on the Gothic line, and gets within almost spitting distance of the Italian border, and he's sleeping in a forest overnight, and a bunch of SS trainees happen to be out training early in the morning, and they stop to urinate in this patch of forest, and they stumble upon Stokes, laying in the bush, and they recapture him. And he's, beaten and interrogated again. And then he's sent back to another German POW camp. And eventually his final escape is executed because they know American forces are fast approaching that camp, but they don't know the intentions of the guards. Will the guards do the right thing and allow the camp to be liberated, or will the guards, turn their guns on the prisoners? And so Stokes' final escape is actually to get at the camp before the American liberation, at which point he and the 2 or 3 other people he escapes with, they find an abandoned German staff car. They scrawl on the side of it in paint, escaped Allied POWs. They get in the German staff car and they manage to drive the German staff car all the way to the American lines, get through the American lines, and then they're intent on driving all the way back to the Channel ports to get, to drive back to the UK. And at some stage, they're stopped by the Americans who say, look, enough is enough, guys. They take the car away and they give them proper transport, and they're processed and sent back to the UK that way.
It's, a German staff car. It's all very well writing escaped PO wars on the side of it. But if I'm sort of zooming over, the Central Europe in a typhoon and see a German staff car, I'm not going to look and see, I wonder if that might have some escapists. I'm just going to let rip, aren't I? I mean, that's incredibly risky.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I guess, they were desperate by this stage of the war, especially Stokes, because I've glossed over several other escape attempts he made because there's too much to tell. So this is towards, last weeks of the war. There's a desperation setting in, and that very idea that rather than your camp be liberated by the Americans, well, 2 things could have happened. One, the guards could have turned their guns on them. 2, they could have done what they did in so many camps, which is march them off to all the concentration camps. It was all very, very desperate and insecure at that time of the war. And so I guess they took their chances in their hands and risked that German staff car.
Now, there's a bit in the press that I got that said there are Robin Hood type assassinations and whatever else. Now, in the film of the book of which you wrote, the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which was worth watching that just to see the after thing and pictures of you on the red carpet where you're obviously a natural for that. But there's quite a lot of sort of longbow action. So are we talking Robin Hood style assassinations? Are we talking longbows in the forest? What's going on there?
No, we're talking about a really amazing story about it's set in Italy, and it's after the Italian armistice, so the Italian surrender. Now, Churchill had rightly decreed that the 80,000 odd Allied prisoners of war, most of whom were British, would be brought back to Allied lines following the Italian surrender. Churchill himself was held as a POW during the Boer War and had escaped, so he knew this personally in his heart. And Roosevelt also, had decreed all those Allied POWs have to be brought home. However, didn't turn out that way. Of course, there was what in retrospect was an insane order issued to all the camps via their secret radios. It became known as the Stay Put Order or Stand Fast Order, that all Allied POWs were not allowed to escape from their camps and were to stay put until Allied forces liberated them. Well, it emanated from the War Office, and somehow they presumed that Allied forces would just steamroller through Italian and German forces in Italy and liberate the camps in a matter of days. Didn't happen that way. The Germans took over the camps, and tens of thousands of POWs were recaptured and sent north to Germany, but 30,000 escaped, and they're hiding out in the Italian hills in the October-November 1943, and small SAS patrols are parachuted deep behind the lines to bring these POWs home. That's their mission. Now, one of those patrols drop into northern Italy in October. There's an 8-man patrol commanded by a guy called Lieutenant McGregor, who was a standout figure from the Second World War in terms of SAS circles. And one of his men was George Arnold, one of his stalwart troopers. And so they're sent in on a 10-day mission. That's the idea. And they've got a radio. They can make contact with headquarters, all standard stuff. However, it doesn't turn out that way. First off, their radio malfunctions and is unworking. Second, they're dropped in completely the wrong place. So very quickly, they realise they've got no way of making contact with headquarters, no way of calling in arms, ammunition, food, all the supplies they need for the POWs to help, get them, to the German lines and then across the German lines to Allied lines. And so they've got two choices. One, they could abandon their mission, or two, they could find a male make one. So they decide to do the latter. And what they do is they discover the fact that the Italian king has hidden one of his luxury Lagonda motor cars, two of them, in fact, thereabouts. And so they find their way to the barn. They accost the Italian king's chauffeur. They choose the best of the two gleaming vehicles, at which the chauffeur has a heart attack. And McGregor scribbles a note with a pencil on a bit of paper saying, "In the name of the King of Britain, I hereby requisition this motor car, and you'll get fully compensated at the end of the war, signed Colonel Bond," although he's Lieutenant McGregor, of course.
Right.
They take the car, they load their men aboard the car, their 8-man patrol, and then they drive at night. And of course, the area is teeming with German troops and Italian fascists. And they drive to the houses of local Italian fascist bigwigs, who they know have been collecting a bounty from the Germans for rounding up escaped Italian POWs and handing them back to the Germans. So they drive to their houses at night. They rob them of all their valuables, their money, their warm clothing, their boots, their food, anything that can help the escaped POWs. And then, with the most horrific, worst individuals, they take them either to the local forest or the local graveyard, and they execute them. They basically kill them shoot them dead. And in this, they're getting assistance from the local Italian gendarmes and all the right-thinking Italians who by now are fed up with decades of fascist rule and the German occupation, such as it is at that time. And that's the Robin Hood style of what they're doing. And the most incredible thing is that they're sent in to execute a 10-day mission. Some of these individuals end up being behind the lines for 6 months on end. So from October 1943 through to June 1944, executing these missions repeately and carrying out repeated raids of that nature against the enemy. And, at times raiding, enemy arms dumps to resupply themselves with weapon and ammunition. And that's how they managed to execute these kind of operations, bringing hundreds, if not thousands, of Allied POWs back to safety. Now, an incredible set of missions, but by this time, of course, by June 1944, they've been given up for dead. They're not missing in action. They're just missing in action, presumed.
Are there reports of a Lagonda sort of steaming around the Italian countryside, wreaking havoc?
There are miscellaneous reports of this strange... At one stage, 200 SS are sent in to capture or kill them. And McGregor's response to that is to say, they're not going to capture or kill us, we're going to ambush them. So repeatedly, they ambush the SS as they're trying to hunt them down. At another stage, these stories are all true, but they beg a belief. McGregor's such an incredible character. At one stage, he poses as a diehard Italian fascist, and befriends, in inverted commas, one of the key German officers who's actually hunting for him and his men, and starts to meet him in a cafe for drinks and meals, and to give him tips how to find the British parachutist to send him on off on the wrong course. Yeah, lots and lots of these incredible stories of daring do. The last man out alive is Arnold, and he gets to North Africa. He's waiting for a flight back to the UK. He keeps getting bumped by VIPs, so he talks an American pilot into flying him to Gibraltar. Arrives in Gibraltar, whereupon he's arrested because he's got no papers, of course. He's lost them behind enemy lines. Yep. No one there's heard of the SS and don't believe a word of his story when he tells them. Eventually, he gets released, gets back to the UK, makes his way to Scotland, finds the SAS base because they're now training for D-Day operations in Scotland, walks onto the base, and the first man he sees is Lieutenant McGregor, his commanding officer from the patrol, who believes he's dead. And can you imagine what that reunion is like?
Good grief. I mean, I know cliches, but it's true stranger than fiction. I mean, when you look at how on earth do you put these together, Damien, to make them Because they are incredible, literally in the true meaning of the word. To think about that whole situation and also the whole sweep of history there, going to sort of Italy via, by North Africa to Gibraltar, which is literally 20 minutes down the road from where I'm sitting right now, back to these training bases and also, of course, with the rumble of D-Day coming as well. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, with Arnold and McGregor's story, again, look, just such a gift. I mean, I was 3 years ago, a young lady called Jo Hussey reached out to me and said, look, my dad wrote his story of his life in the SAS in World War II. We got no idea if any of it's even true or not, but, would you like to read it? So eventually I drove up to Bournemouth to meet them. They live not so far away from me, and I had no idea who their father's story was. I didn't even know which regiment served in or anything. And I walked in to meet them, and there was Jo and then her mum, Debbie Hussey there, the daughter of the chap involved, and sat down and, tea and cake and everything. And I said to Debbie, so what was your father's name? She said, well, you never have heard of him. No books ever mention him. I don't even know what's true in the manuscript that he wrote for the family. And it was there on the table among lots of other family archive. Yeah. His name is George Arnold. Hairs on the back of my neck went up. I said, I'm just writing a story about your father and his, incredible escape and evasion and actions in Italy in World War II. I said, I'll be able to read that manuscript and tell you what's true, what's not true, everything about it. I've researched it inside out. She couldn't believe it. So they handed over the manuscript, and that was, like gold dust. Again, another incredible serendipitous moment which allowed that story to be told. Without that, because we've lost all of our World War II SAS veterans, there's no way to tell these stories anymore. So anyone listening who may have in the attic somewhere an old manuscript or an old chest from, your father or grandfather from World War II, do not think that is not worth, it's gold dust. It's absolute gold dust. And for people like me, historians trying to capture this history before it's too late, those things are absolutely invaluable.
What are you up to next, Damien? I mean, you've got this thing coming up next week. I mean, it is the gift that keeps giving, isn't it? The stuff that comes out, as you said, from old trunk stuff. And we're talking 80 years now, over 80 years now, but this stuff keeps cropping up. These unknown stories, because it's a world war, so you will continue to get these first person accounts, won't you?
Yeah, well, actually, right at the moment, I'm reading the first-hand account of one of the most significant figures from the SAS during the war. So he wrote this book in his 80s, and he wrote it because a reporter said to him, look, why have you never told your story? Tell it to me. And he said, I'm not going to tell you my story. No, I'm not, in my lifetime, I'm not going to be all over the papers. But he then sat down and wrote it privately. And his son reached out to me again about 3-4 months ago and said, would you read, my father's story that he wrote? We don't know if we want it published or anything, but we just want your opinion. So I'm reading it at the moment. And it's absolutely, cracking tale. So, Giles, there are so many stories that one can still tell. So much more of that material is still coming to light. So, it's the gift that keeps giving, and I'm just so very, very lucky.
And even better, I'll better get you back on the show because you keep coming on. You're such a brilliant guest. This book is called SAS Grace Escapes 5. It's by the wonderful Damien Lewis. Damien, if people want to find you online, where do they track you down?
My website is www.damienlewis.com. I'm on Twitter at Author D. Lewis. Facebook is Damien Lewis Writer, and all my events around publication, etc. All the press coverage is on there. So do follow me.
Great to have on this show, Damien.